Staying on Sports Central, we go over our next schedule preview of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Definitely one of the bigger surprise teams of the 2021 season, as this team went 11-3 overall and even made it to the ACC championship game. But how will this team be in 2022 is what we'll be going over here today. We'll be going over the players this team will be losing, who they'll be returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with some notable games from last season. Once again, this team was 11-3 overall, so not a bad season at all for this team. One of the best in program history for sure. I mean, this team was actually supposed to play in a pretty good bowl game too. They're supposed to play Texas A&M, but Texas A&M, the Aggies, had COVID issues, so they ended up getting opted out of that game. So this team ended up playing Rutgers instead, which completely dominated Rutgers, by the way. 38-10 was the final score there. But this team down the stretch, some notable games here. They beat Virginia 37-17 on the road, beat Army 70-56. That was an incredible game there. I mean, he had a super high-scoring game, and that was kind of the theme with Wake Forest last year. Was this team offensively was extremely good. They played lights out offensively most games, but defensively is kind of a different story. This team, in a few games like that Army game especially, and you can see that in the NC State game too, and even the Pitt game, this team, their defense just wasn't quite as good as their offense, that is for sure. But this team did beat NC State there 45-42. That was also a very high-scoring game. Beat Boston College on the road 41-10, lost to Pitt 21-45. And once again beat Rutgers in their bowl game 38-10. First 7 games they were 7-0. So this team was actually one of the last undefeated teams in college football last year. I mean, if you look at the record, this team was undefeated for a long time. They were 4-3 in their last 7 games. So this team did take a couple of losses down the stretch, but still just an outstanding season for this team. I mean, they made it to the ACC championship game, which is definitely a tough thing to do. Roster preview heading into next season. Sam Hartman, your starting quarterback, is returning, so that's going to be a big return there. Last season, put up over 4,200 yards, 39 touchdowns, 14 picks, and a 59% completion rate, so definitely a good season for him. He is a player to watch out for. Sam Hartman, he's got some good experience now, and obviously, I mean, he's been around Wake Forest for a while now, and last season, I would definitely say was his best season to date, so he's shown some improvement. Definitely going to be interesting to see how he does as we head into 2022. I mean, there's still improvement to be made, but I mean, overall, his stats were excellent last season. Running back position, you lose your top one there in Christian Beal. Last season, he put up just right around 700 yards and 7 touchdowns, so he has transferred away, and so you do lose your top running back. But overall, not too concerned about the backfield. You got some pretty good depth, as Justice Ellison is coming back, and same thing with Christian Turner. So you got Ellison and Turner both coming back, 2 running backs that combined for over 1,000 yards last season, as well as 13 touchdowns. So overall, looks pretty good. And Sam Hartman, too, if you look at him, he put up just over 360 yards of rushing last season, as well as 11 rushing touchdowns. So, yeah, Sam Hartman, he had 50 total touchdowns last season. He is a major impact player, and this offense was outstanding last year. And this offense looks great once again, even returning production-wise going into 2022. So, I mean, there's a lot of promise here for this Wake Forest football team. Receiving core, A.T. Perry is coming back, your top receiver from last year, and also your second one there, and Jakari Robertson. He has taken off, so he will not be around. But I mean, the receiving core, you had 2 receivers over 1,000 yards. You had A.T. Perry, who put up nearly 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns, and Robertson put up over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. So you do lose your second, but it's going to be huge to have A.T. Perry back. He is going to be a major playmaker once again, I can imagine, in 2022, considering this team is, I mean, he's only getting experience, and he's only going to get better. So there's a lot of promise there, and you also return your third receiver, and Taylor Marin. Last season, he put up just over 600 yards and 5 touchdowns. So overall, looks pretty good. I would say offensively, you also lose 1 offensive lineman. You lose 1 on the defensive line, and then 3 linebackers, and then 1 on the secondary. So linebacking core takes a couple of hits for sure, but otherwise, things look pretty good for Wake Forest going into next season. I would be concerned, though. I mean, this defense, that is the one concern that I have with Wake Forest. Offensively, they're going to be back, and they're going to be good and possibly even better in 2022 versus 2021. It's just a matter of the defense. If this defense can step it up, play some good football, this team is very much a major ACC contender, and if they win the ACC, potentially that gives them an opportunity to make a run at the college football playoff. So, yeah, Wake Forest, this team is for real, and I really like where this team is headed as we go into 2022. Chances of another ACC title run, definitely likely, I think for Wake Forest. I mean, this is a team that, I mean, definitely shows tremendous potential going into next season. The ceiling is very high, that is for sure. Transfer portal and recruiting going into next season. Transfer portal hasn't been terribly active with Wake Forest. This team does have a few players that have taken off, and the one key player that is coming in is Kobe Turner from Richmond. Otherwise, you're losing a few players. You got a defensive back. You got a couple defensive backs taking off, a couple of running backs as well. Christian Beal, we mentioned him before, and then linebacker DJ Taylor is also off. So that's what the transfer portal looks like. And the recruiting, you're number 77 in the nation, which is obviously not very good. You're number 14 in the ACC. So this team is the worst in the ACC with recruiting going into next season. They got 2 4-star recruits and then 9 3-stars coming in for next year. So, but either way, this team still returns quite a bit of great talent from last year. So I'm not too concerned about the recruiting right now, but that's something to keep an eye on for the future, is that this team's class for 2022 isn't looking too great. So, I mean, that could come back to bite a bit in a couple of years. But as for next season, this team is built to definitely win some big football games. But that said, let's look at your schedule now. Going into next season, you start off the year against VMI at home. You got Vanderbilt on the road, and then you got Liberty at home as well. For your conference schedule, you got Clemson coming to town on the 24th, and to start off your October, you go to Florida State. You play Army at home on the 8th. You got Boston College also at home after that. Louisville and NC State both on the road, and then North Carolina on the 12th of November, followed by Syracuse and then Duke on the road to finish out the season. So Wake Forest, not a terrible, difficult schedule. I mean, Clemson's going to be good next year. You got to play NC State on the road. That's going to be a good team. North Carolina, I mean, they're okay. They're going back into a rebuilding phase, it looks like, after the 2021 season, just based off of how much talent they're losing. So, I mean, obviously the schedule isn't terribly difficult. I mean, if you can beat Clemson and NC State, I mean, this team has got a good chance to go undefeated. So, I mean, there's a lot of potential and a lot of promise here, even with their schedule. Their non-conference games aren't even that difficult. I mean, Liberty is a decent team. Vanderbilt, obviously, SEC, but they're by far the worst team in the conference. So, but anyway, that being said, let's look at your first 6 games here. VMI, easy win. Same thing with Vanderbilt and Liberty. All 3 of those games should be pretty easy wins. I mean, I'm pretty confident Wake Forest wins all of their first 3. I mean, Vanderbilt being a road game potentially could be a trippy one, but I'm not really expecting too much out of Vanderbilt again. I mean, they're the bottom feeder in football of the SEC. And then Liberty, obviously, that could be a decent team, but Wake Forest has it at home. I'm going to take the Demon Deacons there. Clemson at home, that's going to be a tough one. Tigers next year, I think, look pretty good. They're returning some good production, and Clemson, I wouldn't be surprised one bit to see them back competing for an ACC title next season. So I'm going to favor the Tigers in that one. I understand it's a home game for Wake Forest, but Clemson, I do think Clemson shows, I mean, both teams are going to be good between Wake Forest and Clemson, but I'm going to favor the Tigers for now. Florida State on the road, going to be a close one, but I'm going to favor Wake Forest, then Army. I'm going to say it's an easy win as well, with it being at home. So in your first 6 games, I got you favored in 5 of the first 6, so things look pretty good, and that Clemson game obviously is one of 2 big games for sure on your schedule. Looking at the second half here, Boston College and Louisville, both close ones, but I'm going to favor Wake Forest in both those games for now. NC State being on the road, that's going to be a tough game. NC State's looking like a really good team next year, and honestly, I've mentioned this before, but my big 3, I think, for the ACC next season, the 3 teams that I'm really keeping an eye on are Clemson, Wake Forest, and NC State. I mean, you got North Carolina, who looks to go back into a rebuilding phase. Pittsburgh's losing Kenny Pickett, which is a massive impact on that team. And if you note off a couple other teams like Miami, etc., I mean, they just don't look quite as good as what I would say are the big 3 in the ACC, being Wake Forest, NC State, and Clemson. With that said, NC State, I mean, that's going to be a tough game with it being on the road. I'm going to favor the Wolfpack in that game for now. North Carolina, close one, but I'll favor the Demon Deacons, and then Syracuse and Duke to finish out the season, I would say, are both easy wins. So record projection, 8-4 to 11-1 for Wake Forest. This is a team that I'm pretty confident gets at least 8 wins next year. I mean, things look really good. I mean, this is a team that was a surprise team last year just because there was some inexperience on this team, but they're returning a lot of the key players that they had last year. So that's going to be huge going into next season. So I do expect, once again, another good season for Wake Forest, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below on the Demon Deacons, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.